Hello there. Welcome in. Wednesday edition of the show. Glad to have you along, whether you're listening on your radio, whether you're listening online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, which is free to download and free to use. It is my preferred way of listening to the station when I'm not talking on it. And it is sponsored by Diversus Health Mental Health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts. You could call or text them in at 719-247-1313, or you can always tweet at me at Gingerly Tweets. A pair of Air Force Hall of Fame inductees will be joining me this hour. Dan Oosterhouse, who was equally as great of a tennis coach as he was a player at the academy, and that's why he's getting into the Hall of Fame. He'll join me in a little less than 20 minutes, and then right after that, Tim Jefferson, who won the most games of any quarterback in Air Force football history, will be my guest right after that, as we continue to introduce you to the 12th Hall of Fame class of the Air Force Academy, and then things open up quite a bit after that for your thoughts on this Wednesday. Last night is the reason why you should really listen to the show every day. Because I told you yesterday that it would be worth watching Michael Malone on ESPN's coverage of the Western Conference Final. I have covered Michael Malone. I have listened to him enough to know that at some point something would be said that I would inevitably be talking about today. And the thing that most people are seizing on, there were two things. But the thing most people are seizing on, you had to wait a little bit. You had to wait till SportsCenter after the Thunder took game one over Minnesota, 114-88. But Michael Malone said something.
And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he showed why he's the MVP. He took over in the second half.
Not SGA. This is why SGA is up for the MVP, why he may be named the MVP, because he has been announced as the MVP. And we all thought it was coming, but as of last night, it had not been announced. So could this have been Michael Malone just letting the cat out of the bag, that he already knew that SGA was going to be the MVP? I don't think so. I think he was saying, this is why Shai is the MVP. This is why, if I can fill in some blanks here, is deserving of being the MVP. But that's weird, right? Because just back in March, in his previous job, he said this.
If you didn't know that Nikola won 3 MVPs, and I put player A and player B on paper, and you had no idea that the guy who's averaging a triple-double, the guy who's top 3 in the 3 major statistical categories, things that no one's ever done, he wins the MVP 10 times out of 10.
What? Wait a minute here. Let me hear it again, because that was Michael Malone, unless my ears deceive me, saying that Nikola Jokic should be the MVP. This is the same guy. I know he had more hair, but I believe it's Michael Malone. This is him last night, right?
And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he showed why he's the MVP. He took over in the second half.
Was this shade? Was Michael Malone throwing shade at the Denver Nuggets and the player that he owes so much of his success as a head coach to? No, I don't think it is. Here's the thing about coaches and athletes who enter the media space. It's not that much unlike someone who happens to work in the White House, let's say, or somebody that's in Congress and then leaves to join the media. Because in their previous job, they have to toe the line. Right? They have to speak in only flattering terms about their party. They have to back their party's leader. They have to toe that line. But when they get into the media, now they are under a different edict. State your mind. That's not part of the job description when you're a politician or when you're a staffer in the White House. You have a different job description. So I think the most likely reality here is that last night you got a more honest Michael Malone than you did back in March. Back in March, he's towing the company line. He's backing his guy. Last night, he is unencumbered. He is being told by ESPN to speak his mind. And I also think that ESPN orientation probably took pretty well. And here's what I mean by that. A major talking point coming out of the Nuggets Thunder series in order to perpetuate a narrative to hype up this Western Conference Finals series, I think, either descriptively or not, is to say, hey, we got the MVP in this series. Let's talk about it. That's a big draw. That will get people to tune in. So it's probably a combination of those two. But I think if you were to ask me which one is Michael Malone's true opinion, because I don't think that new evidence presented itself from the time he got fired till now. I don't think the MVP case of Nikola Jokic changed drastically over the course of 2 months. Oklahoma City was well ahead of everybody in the West. I mean, let's be honest about it. You could have easily cast your vote. You shouldn't, but you could have easily cast your vote in March, and probably nothing would have changed your mind. Michael Malone was being honest last night. And you know what? I don't have a problem with it. I really don't. Let me say this. I don't have a problem with him having the opinion that SGA is the MVP. I do think it's not a great look when we can pull clips of you from not that long ago being quite vociferous in your defense of one guy winning the MVP. And then now when you're unencumbered by a team that signs your paycheck, you saying that the other guy is the MVP. I don't think it's a good look for Michael Malone. And it's a situation he knew he was going to get into. Right? You think when he's approached by ESPN that he doesn't feel like at some point he's going to be asked about the MVP or about the best player in the league or anything like that? You don't think he doesn't think that anything about his time in Denver or who he coached in Denver is going to come up at any point. He chose. I don't feel bad for him because he chose to take ESPN's money and to be a part of their broadcast, which he has every right to. It's a bad look for him, but I fully understand what he was doing in those two different situations. And you could criticize him for it if you want. I just think he looks bad. And I don't think he's being petty, but he looks petty. Because of the way things ended in Denver, it's being perceived that he's throwing shade at the Denver Nuggets and at Nikola Jokic. And then you go, well, Nikola Jokic didn't stop him from being fired. I don't think we need to go that deep. I really don't think so. I think we are getting a more honest Michael Malone. Because there's another thing that he said that I actually think could be more perceived as shade that he said earlier in the evening when he called Oklahoma City fans the best fans in the league. I think that could be more construed as shade, as taking a shot. But I think really what it actually is just that Michael Malone, when he was employed by the Denver Nuggets, towed the company line. And that's why him being a part of these Western Conference Finals is so fascinating, because we are going to get his honest opinion. Or at least I would hope so. I would hope he's being honest. Because what's worse? Him being dishonest now, just to, sell out to ESPN and do their bidding, or him being honest. I think he was being honest last night. And let's not make this like, look, he said what he said. He doesn't look good, but we know that this MVP debate was very close. And we'll find out in less than a couple of hours how the final vote actually went. It's not an out of left field take to say that SGA is the MVP. It's just when we can pull a clip of you defending Nikola Jokic and almost framing it like, how could anyone think that anyone not named Nikola Jokic is the MVP? This is the inner workings. It's the same thing that happens in politics. These people that will defend their party, their president, their party leader, whatever it might be, to the death and go to the mat for them when they're in one role and then immediately leave and go completely against it. You don't look great. Because in one of these two cases, you're being dishonest. And I think it was when he was the head coach of the Denver Nuggets. That's why last night was fascinating. Because we got the real feelings of Michael Malone. There you go. By the way, I disagree with him. I think SGA last night showed in many ways why he was going to win the MVP, or why he was being heavily considered for the MVP. I think Nikola Jokic in the Oklahoma City series showed why he was the MVP. And we'll get into that discussion now that it is reported that SGA is indeed the NBA MVP. And we also have to talk about that game one last night and what else Shea showed on full display once again last night. That wasn't such a great look for him. Take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. The sudden change of heart from Michael Malone. Get your thoughts on that. Coming up next, a couple of Air Force Hall of Fame inductees, starting first with Dan Oosterhouse. Let's talk a little tennis here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. The 12th class of the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame will be inducted on September 26th. A member of that class really could have been inducted for either being a tennis player for the Falcons or a tennis coach, but that just strengthens his case even more because he's getting in as both. He had 113 wins as the number one player on his teams, the second most in program history, and he also helped coach a lot more wins than that. Dan Oosterhuis is my guest. Dan, congratulations. Great to have you.
Hi, Ryan. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So do you get to, do people at the Academy now have to greet you as Hall of Famer, Dan, or is there any special title that now comes along with this?
Oh, man, that's funny. I still love being called coach.
Okay.
And yeah, that's my favorite title. So no, I'm just really appreciative and honored by the recognition.
Now, I think I know the answer to this question based on what you just said, but I will ask you. You're getting in for your accomplishments as both a player and a coach, right? But which, if I had to tell you, you only get recognized as one, or the aspect of your career at the Air Force Academy that you're most proud of, would it be player or would it be coach?
Yeah, I'm just so lucky that I got to do both. I was a coach for 14 years of the team that I played for. I only played as a cadet for 4 years, and I had multiple, years of that as a coach, and I got to go through so much. So I really look back at my time here and even in the Air Force for 20 years. It's just all of it kind of ran together, and I was just so lucky. But very, very proud of the accomplishments I had as a coach. So I guess I'd have to answer it that way.
How did your time as a player at the Academy help you in your coaching career when you returned?
Yeah, I learned so much from my head tennis coach here, Rich Gugat. He was here for 34 years, and he was the main reason why I came to the Air Force Academy. And so I learned so much from him. And when I was a senior, I kind of had a deal with him that I would love to come back and be able to replace him someday. And, working through the Air Force system and being a pilot and, going all over places and just never knowing what was next for me, it was kind of a pipe dream. But when I got to come back as a coach about 15 years later, I had all those experiences from Rich Gugat that really helped lay a great foundation for me. I learned a lot along the way as an officer as well, but it was really just the lessons I learned from him that really carried me at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think people understand that that's always a part of it. The coaches that do end up serving in the Air Force, kind of this similar arc to what you had, and in understanding how important that is when it comes to coaching at the Air Force Academy. I'm curious how much, when you were talking to your players, when you were a coach, how much of those talks were about, when I was a player at the Academy, and how much of it was when I was a pilot in the Air Force for 21 years?
A lot of it, Ryan. It was, right when I came back, I was so fresh to the operational Air Force and coming out of, tours where I was doing some pretty cool stuff. And I wanted to relay all of that to my cadets. And, that's going to be their future in 3 to 4 years or less. And so that I really tried to tie in a lot of lessons that I learned, not just as a cadet, but the more relevant lessons as an officer and a pilot and what you go through. And, even sometimes on the tennis court and in practice and when you're getting ready for matches, just the mental kind of training and mental stress that I was able to kind of work through as a pilot. And I tried to relate that to my cadets. And I think a lot of our military coaches are able to do that. And that is what makes it pretty special to have, somebody with that experience come back and coach here.
Absolutely. Dan Oosterhouse, my guest, one of the inductees in the latest Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame. As a coach, one of your best teams was one of your last, right? In 2022, setting a Mount West record for wins. Talk about that team and what all came together to have such a great season.
That really was a great year. Yeah, the 2022, 2023 year was my last year as a head coach. I didn't know it at the time when we were going through it. But yeah, I just had such a special class of guys. And that was my 14th year. And I really do think that I was able to bring a lot of stuff together and really just, I think, help kind of open up the guys to be more comfortable on the court and just enjoy it as much as they could, love competition. And we had such a great senior class that year. So it was really special. We did get a bunch of Mountain West wins and, had some great wins over, I think we had a really good win over Navy that year and just a lot of special stuff. So I do look back on that last year with a lot of pride.
For those of us not fortunate enough to watch Dan Oosterhouse, the player, what kind of player were you?
Yeah, it's really different than how we play today. I was very aggressive and loved to serve and volley. And so I did not want to stay back and, pound from the baseline like a lot of players do now. And I would serve and try to get to the net as quick as I could. I would attack. And that's just something that really suited my personality and suited the style that I adapted once I got here. Colorado Springs is at a very high altitude and tennis, you can play it really aggressively up here because the ball moves fast. And so I just took advantage of that and really loved it.
I know it's both. Any cadet that comes into the Air Force Academy that also plays sports, they want to succeed on whatever playing field or, in your case, court that they can do, but they're also choosing to go for the career that they will have thereafter. I'm curious if you had to slice up the pie a little bit, choosing the Air Force Academy, was it the vast majority of the reason why you went there was because of the career that you would have in the Air Force and versus how much of it was, hey, I want to go and compete at a high level playing tennis?
Yeah, Ryan, that's actually what I love about my current job is I get to have those discussions with 17, 18-year-olds right now. I'm the director of recruiting for athletics at the Air Force Academy. And so I get to have those kinds of conversations with young men and women that are trying to be recruited for any of our sports. And I remember being that age and wondering what was it that attracted me to the Air Force Academy. And you really have no idea when you're 17 years old what the next 4 years, let alone the rest of your career is going to look like. But what attracted me was it was something different I wanted to do and get out of my hometown and explore the country, go to a college that really I knew nothing about, but have an opportunity to get the best education and play Division I athletics. And I didn't know what that meant beyond that, but now what I get to do is try to help explain that to these recruits and give them a little more insight into the decision-making process. That it's a huge decision, but I can tell you for myself, it was the best decision I ever made. And I really had no idea what I was getting into, but I was all in.
Well, it worked out for you, I think, in my amateur opinion, certainly for you, Dan. I'm curious, just your thoughts being away. You're not that far removed, and from the tennis program, and as you mentioned, you're still obviously right there at the academy. How would you rate the performance of your pupil Evan when it comes to taking the reins of that program that you saw? You left it in such a great place. How has he picked up where you left off?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning Evan. He's been fantastic and just finished his second year as a head coach. And he was my assistant for 9 years. And I knew pretty early on, about halfway through, I guess, that this was the guy that I wanted to be able to replace me when I was ready. And so it was an easy decision for me and the recommendation that I had to make sure that he was able to be the next head coach. He was my first year coaching at the academy, he was the best player at BYU, who was a big rival of ours. And I just remember having to coach against him as a player. And I remember his toughness and intensity. And I always knew that if he became a coach, I wanted to have him on my team. And so, yeah, he's done a great job. Got Coach of the Year in the Mountain West this year, and the team had a fantastic season. I love still being a part of the team and getting to watch them play.
Yeah, they did have a great season. So maybe we couldn't get Evan to be a Falcon as a player, but in the end, we got him as a coach, and that's
Right.
that is a great in and of itself. Dan Oosterhouse, a member of the 12th class of the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame, which will be inducted on September 26th. Again, congratulations, obviously, beyond well-deserved. And I'm glad that you and I got a chance to catch up a little bit, and then maybe we'll see you on the 26th of September.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for all you do for Air Force Athletics. Love listening to you and appreciate all your support for the Falcons.
No, that's kind of you to say that. Appreciate it, Dan. We'll talk soon. That's Dan Oosterhouse, Athletics Hall of Famer now. Not making anybody at the Academy call him Hall of Famer, although I would say it would be good to do that. Amazing. And it seems so obvious, right? If you can get somebody with the ability to coach that used to play at an academy, but I mean, it's just you see what he was as a player or what he accomplished as a player, and then he was able to do that as a coach. Not every Air Force Academy cadet athlete has the ability to coach, and when you get one that does, like Dan, it leads to great results, as it did throughout his almost 2 decades as the head coach of the Air Force Falcons. As I said, we got back-to-back Hall of Famers got to get out because the all-time winningest QB in Falcon history, Tim Jefferson, is my guest right after this. Going back to back with our Air Force Hall of Fame inductees today. Joining me now is the all-time winningest quarterback in Falcon history. He amassed over 6,500 yards of offense, 45 of them through the air, 34 touchdown passes, couple of bowl wins, perhaps more importantly, couple of CIC trophies to his credit. Tim Jefferson is my guest. Tim, first of all, congratulations on a well-deserved honor. Appreciate you joining me today.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan, for having me. Thank you so much.
I mentioned the splits there on your offensive stats. If you ask people from the outside, Air Force quarterbacks aren't supposed to be able to go through the air. What were you doing at the academy?
I think we were just utilizing my skills as we saw fit. You know, I was blessed to have some pretty talented receivers, a group of receivers around me at the time. So that made putting the ball up in the air a little bit, you know, less stressful on the coaching staff. You know, when I was playing quarterback there.
Did you play in an offense in high school like you would play for Troy Calhoun at the academy?
No. In high school, I ran purely triple option, and I maybe threw the ball, you know, maybe 4 or 5 times a game at most. Here's the funny thing. I never actually had a quarterbacks coach until I got to the Air Force Academy. And, you know, Blaine Morgan was my quarterbacks coach the entire time. But my offense in high school, you know, was purely run the ball, triple option. And, you know, when Coach Calhoun got hired, he was coming straight from the Houston Texans, and it made me kind of nervous, you know, knowing he had an NFL background. But he told me to trust him, and you know he'll make it work, and you know they'll drop stuff that fits their players. So I had faith, and I went for it, and it all turned out well.
Well, I should say so. So what was it about Coach Calhoun that made you trust him? Was it the NFL ties? Was it the meetings that you had with him? Because that's, you know, I know you go to the Air Force Academy for many other reasons outside of football, but you're a guy that wanted to compete in football, right? You wanted to do well. So what was it about what Coach Calhoun told you or this team that you were like, not only is this a great place for me to set myself up for my future career, but I can really be successful playing football at the academy?
You know, that's a great question. It comes down to my very first initial interactions with the Air Force coaching staff, and that's when Coach Charlton Warren came and found me in my high school back in, I think, 2006 timeframe. And he asked me, hey, Tim, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I told him, I want to be a pilot. And his exact words after that were, my man, do we have the deal for you? You know, you can go to a great school, get a great education. You can play Division I football, and then you can become a pilot afterwards. And for me, hearing those 3 things were like, check, check, and check. Where do I sign? And you know, when, you know, Fisher DeBerry got, you know, released and Coach Calhoun came in, it was more of, hey, you know, let me talk to this guy a little bit to see what his intentions are and how he would utilize me and whatnot. But he just seemed like a straight up genuine person. And, you know, every conversation I have with Coach Calhoun is it's always genuine. He treats me, you know, how I feel respected. And that's one of the things that I can say that some of the other coaches that I was recruited by, it did not come off that way. Mm-hmm. And so that made it a lot easier for me to trust him and, you know, put my faith in him and to go out west, because I knew that in the end, I wanted to be a pilot. The Air Force Academy was the best place for that to be, to be able to follow my dreams. But at the same time, I could also play some pretty good football out there too. So, you know, that choice became a lot clearer and easier the later my recruiting process went on.
And not only did you end up being successful throughout your career at the Air Force, I mean, you came right in and you played. And, you know, I call the women's basketball game, so I've gotten to know better than I ever have before what it takes to be a cadet, but especially as a freshman, I mean, the amount of stuff that you have to do, and as a freshman at the academy, it's mind-boggling. And then you're going to go out on Saturdays and you're going to produce. I mean, what allowed you to be able to balance all of that right out of the gate as a freshman?
Well, it definitely was not easy. I will start off with that. It was a challenge. I had my hands full, and it was probably overflowing at times. And if you ask the coaches, they'll even tell you that, because it was not always sunshine and rainbows for me, especially early on throughout my career at the academy. But learning how to grow up, first off, growing up and learning how to balance my plate. Time management was a big thing that I had to learn. And then, just sometimes you just have to prioritize, and sometimes football did take a back seat to other things I had going on in my life at the time, especially during the spring of my freshman year. So yeah, it wasn't easy. It was hard. It was a group effort, and I had some people to lean back on that helped me get to the finish line.
Tim Jefferson, my guest, Air Force Hall of Fame inductee. You mentioned the group effort, and I started off our conversation by mentioning the fact that you are the all-time winningest quarterback in the history of Air Force football. That's a group effort, right? It's not just Tim Jefferson, although you were a huge reason why Air Force won the amount of games that it did. But just over your 4 years, how special were those Air Force teams, and how much did they allow you to flourish and rack up the wins the way you guys did?
During my senior year, when it was becoming more apparent that I was going to break that record held by the late D. Dallas, but, the reporters would always ask me, what it's like, racking up that many wins. But every single time I had to remind them that, it's a team game. It's a team game. The quarterback is just one player, one position on the team. I didn't play defense. I didn't play. Well, I can't say I didn't play special teams, because I actually have, several punts under my name, but I didn't primarily play special teams. I pretty much only played on the offensive side of the ball. So, any coach will tell you that it takes all three phases of the game to win the game. And I was just blessed to have, special players around me on both sides of the ball and on the special teams that helped the group effort get to where we wanted to be, which was collecting victories.
The 2010 season, you win 9 games, and even you look at the losses, some of the teams that you played 3 top 10 teams that in that season, and Oklahoma and Utah. I don't want to bring up painful memories, but those could have gone either way, right? Just that team in particular, what made it so special?
When you look at that 2010 team and you look at some of the people that we had on the field at the time, and look at the offense, obviously, myself and Asher Clark and AJ Wallerstein, Jonathan Warzika, just name a few people. But then you look at the defense side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball is where it was really made during that season. People like John Davis and Anthony Wright and Reggie Rembert, for example. You had an All-American on the defensive side of the ball, and Reggie. That's an awesome feeling to know that you have that type of security blanket on the field for you to help your team in times of need. So we had a special group of players, and to have that type of talent on the team at a service academy at the same time is very rare. And I think you saw that when we went throughout that season. Now, unfortunately, we started getting hit with the injury bug towards the tail end of the season, but yeah, you definitely saw that the talent was there. And I believe during that season, the only bad loss that we had was TCU, right? I think it was 38-7. And even in that game, we jumped out to a 7-0 lead. And so it's one of those where, those games, Oklahoma was all we needed was the ball back. We had all the momentum in that game. We just need the ball back one more time. San Diego State, I believe. We lost on because of a questionable call that overturned a 2-point conversion that would have tied the game. And then Utah, we turned the ball over 5 times in that game. So all of those games could have been a coin flip. So that's how special that team was. It was a great time.
Tim Jefferson, my guest. Over the course of your time at Air Force, you play in Ann Arbor, you play in Norman. I mean, going in as the Air Force Falcons to some of those, even what was it? I think it was your second game of your career. You're going into a Big Ten stadium in Minnesota. So what was it like going in as the Air Force Falcons to some of these massive stadiums in these major conferences, especially when you talk about Ann Arbor and Norman? I mean, those are two of the most, storied college football programs. I don't know if that was part of the selling point to get you to Air Force, that you be playing in those kind of places, but I got to imagine that was pretty special going into some of those places.
So I just have to correct you real quick. I didn't play at Michigan. That was the year after I had graduated.
Oh, my bad. Okay.
And, Connor Dietz led them into Michigan, where they, competed very well.
Okay.
But my sophomore year, you mentioned Minnesota. Yeah, that was a fun game. That was the very first game in Minnesota Stadium, TCF Bank Stadium, I believe is what it's called. That was the grand opening of that stadium, and we went in there and we lost by I think 7, but whatnot. But that was an awesome experience. That was a live crowd and a sellout crowd and whatnot. Playing a Big Ten team and taking them down to the wire. And so that's just the Air Force brand is a nationwide brand, and we're not afraid to travel anywhere to play anybody at any time. So that's one thing that we like to pitch to people, is that we will play anybody that's willing to play us. And you'll see that there are not a lot of schools that are willing to play service academies, because they know what's at stake when they play against a service academy type football team.
Oh, 100%, because I was going to say it's been a while since Air Force was able to have, like a gauntlet like you did, the 3 top 10 teams in one season. And it's not because Troy Calhoun's not trying to. It's for exactly the reason you're saying. These big schools, they want it a little bit, I'll just say it, a little bit easier path through the non-conference than to welcome in the Air Force Falcons. Hopefully we'll get back to some of those big-time matchups here sooner rather than later. Of course, playing any sport at the Air Force Academy, it's when are you playing Army, when are you playing Navy? You got to do it on a regular basis. What's the number one commander-in-chief's memory that you have, whether it's playing Army or playing Navy? What's that one memory that is most vivid to you?
Well, if I had to pick one memory, man, that's tough, because both of the games my senior year were, oh man, that was heart pounding stuff. The game against Navy that we had, we're up 28-10 going into the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in overtime, and they took the lead in overtime. So now, I'm sitting here on the sidelines thinking, this can't be how my senior year season, plays out, with this massive upset loss at Navy. But, luckily we were able to come out with the victory, thanks to Alex Means blocking the extra point that they had. And then, I snuck in the touchdown, and then David Baska, ties it up. Parker Harrington tied it up, took the lead and gave us the win with the extra point in overtime. So that was an extraordinary effort, all around. And then you look at the game against Army, we should have been down 28-0 going into halftime. There were 2 plays in the first half. We were already down 14, and there were 2 other plays that they could have scored on. We stopped them 4th and goal at the 1-yard line. And then we had a play where Josh Hall stripped stripped their running back, and the ball bounced out the back of the end zone as he was going into the end zone. So, and then we were able to come out at halftime and put together 24 straight points and ended up winning that game 24-14. So that was that senior season gauntlet with Army and Navy was man. When my heart's pounding now when I sit here and talk about it, because I was like, man, that I may not have had my chance to go to the White House with, one or two plays that went the wrong way, and I would never have had my chance to go to the White House to meet the president and receive the trophy. So those were fun times for sure.
Yeah, what is that like, getting to, we get it every year with all these different sports, right? The champions go in, and what's obviously unique about the CIC trophy is the winner gets to go. Well, what was that experience like?
Oh man, very, very, very unique, to put it simply. I have flashbacks from that time, and there are times where I can only piece together like certain memories from it, because like it was such a blur, standing in the White House, having the president of the United States, talking to you, and here I am presenting President Barack Obama with, a memorable trophy, one of the footballs from one of the game balls, and I'm up there at the podium and I'm presenting the president of the United States with a gift. And like, how many people can say that they've had the opportunity to do that? Not many, I can guarantee that. So it was a very special occasion, obviously. But it definitely hits hard when you specifically have that type of opportunity to, make such a lasting memory. So yeah, the White House was definitely a fun trip. That's definitely for sure.
Well, and then he becomes your boss, right? Like there's also that dynamic too, that just makes it's so unique, and it's such a only at those other two schools as well, but at the Air Force Academy is where we like to focus on, to have the opportunity to get that. And I know that Coach Calhoun's got the guys building towards making another trip to the White House in the very near future. Do you speak, I'm sure, on the 26th? You got the framework of your speech ready to go, or?
Well, honestly, I have not been told what is expected of me for the ceremony on the 26th. So I have not. I mean, that's not until September as well. So I've got a little bit of time to get that all straightened out. But
yeah,
they'll let me know what they want from me for that. So
I think, and I've talked to some people. I think that I think you have to have one joke. I think you're going to have to tell a joke, maybe perform a skit or something like that. So I don't want to ruin. You know what? Forget I said anything. I don't want to ruin the surprise. Tim, this was a lot of fun, man. Strolling down memory lane with some great Air Force teams that you were a big part of. Thanks so much for taking some time, and congratulations on a very well-deserved honor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. And it's been a pleasure. That's for sure.
Yep. We'll see you on the 26th, Tim. That's Tim Jefferson, all-time winningest quarterback in Falcon history, joining me on Drive Time Sports. The thing right out of the gate, that he strictly ran the triple option. He didn't sling it around. I'm always curious, the quarterbacks that Air Force recruits. Like, do you want to teach them the system? Like, have a player with all of these physical tools and teach them the system? Or would you like them to come in with the knowledge of the system that you're going to run and try to build on it? I mean, that's really cool. And it became one of the most prolific passers in the history of the program. I mean, he hardly threw it at all in high school. Tim Jefferson, Air Force Hall of Fame inductee. Dan Oosterhouse as well before that. That was cool. Appreciate shouts to Troy Garnhart at Air Force because he's the one that's connecting me with all of these guys. Had Matt McCraw earlier in the week. Jeff Hydemus is going to join me on Friday, talk a little water polo. So looking forward to that. Coming up next, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will be named the MVP. Why I still don't agree with it. And you juxtapose the MVP announcement with some of the reaction to the way he played last night's game. It's interesting. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in Drive Time Sports here on Extra Sports 1300. You can watch the show live on a daily basis on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, at XTRA Sports 1300. And because we are on YouTube, I am contractually obligated to ask you to like and subscribe and indoctrinate your friends. That's the third thing. It's just, when you get on YouTube, that's what YouTube tells you. You have to say these things. And I am not one to push back against authority. 719-247-1313 is the number if you'd like to give your thoughts. Perhaps you would like to give your thoughts on the fact that SGA is going to be named the MVP tonight. About an hour from now, Shams Charania, scoopage earlier this afternoon before TNT can roll it out. I think that's intentional. But we knew this, right? Like anybody who is holding out hope that Nikola Jokic would be named the MVP, I think you were borderline delusional. I mean, let's just be honest about it here. He wasn't going to win. But at the same time, even if you had to acknowledge that SGA was going to be named the MVP, doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Because I don't. I'm sorry. Like, I would like there to be equal opportunity for everyone. But we are living in the era of Nikola Jokic, and he just, to me, has a monopoly on that award and everything that award stands for. And yes, in today's day and age, and people act like it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just the way the evolution of what we talk about in sports goes. We are very numbers driven. We are very statistically driven. We grew up reading the back of baseball cards and putting weight behind those numbers and making our sports arguments based on the numbers we saw in the back of those cards. And I will use the guy who last night said this.
And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he showed why he's the MVP. He took over in the second half.
I'll use his previous words against him to make my point.
If you didn't know that Nikola won 3 MVPs, and I put player A and player B on paper, and you had no idea that the guy who's averaging a triple-double, the guy who's top 3 in the 3 major statistical categories, things that no one's ever done, he wins the MVP 10 times out of 10.
Yep. Yeah. The numbers of Nikola Jokic, and I saw this from, I think it was StatMuse, like Shai's numbers aren't even favorable compared to Luka last year, who didn't win the MVP. So I'm sorry, there's not a statistical case to be made that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander deserves the MVP. But even I am not completely beholden to numbers. And I will direct your attention to who would have gotten my vote for the NFL MVP. I would not have voted for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson clearly had the best numbers, and many people who were touting him as the MVP pointed to his numbers. And I said no. But what Josh Allen had was something that Shai doesn't. Josh Allen put up impressive numbers, not more impressive than Lamar, but he put them up in a year, and you could call it the narrative, call it what you want, put it up in a year where we thought that the Buffalo Bills were going to take a step back, where they shed payroll, where they got rid of weapons that Josh Allen previously had at his disposal. What ultimately won out over the numbers for me was the idea that Josh Allen did more with less. Shai doesn't have that argument. He doesn't, because we continue to see this. And if Michael Malone wants to talk about last night being a case in point of why SGA is the MVP, let's use that. What I have seen throughout these playoffs is that Oklahoma City has the vastly superior supporting cast of anybody Shea has a better supporting cast than Jokic does, than Anthony Edwards does. Part of the reason why they won 68 games is absolutely because Shea is their best player. But it's also because of both Jalen Williams and Alex Caruso and Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. And I've gone back to this. When you watch the Denver Nuggets play and you emphasize the second letter of MVP, it's an impossible argument to go against. You just can't argue around it. You just got done watching 7 games, and Shea was brilliant, absolutely brilliant in the last 3 games of that series. But you watch and you say, and Game 7's a great example of this, just a little microcosm. Nikola Jokic on the floor, Nuggets take a double-digit lead right out of the gate. He sits out immediately. The Nuggets cough up that lead. And not only cough up the lead, Oklahoma City runs right through them and gets what would prove to be an insurmountable lead themselves before David Adelman could even get Jokic back in. So if you're somebody who says we got to go somewhere else with the MVP, we can't keep just giving it to Jokic, blame Calvin Booth. Blame the fact that the Denver Nuggets can't figure out a way to get Nikola Jokic one star player next to him, or a collection of maybe 3 quality role players. Like, they can't cobble together any of that. And that's part of what makes Nikola Jokic's MVP case so strong. And none of this is Shea's fault. It's not his fault that Sam Presti is a far superior general manager than Calvin Booth was. But it's the fact of the matter. You can't watch anybody else in the league and say that the success of that team is more dependent on them than the Nuggets' success is dependent on Nikola Jokic. So Nikola Jokic has the statistical argument, and then he has the who does more with less argument. The only argument that Shea has over Jokic, best player, best team. Which I thought it wasn't supposed to be that objective, that cut and dry. I thought we were supposed to look at some nuance to it. Because there are a lot of years previously that the number 1 overall seed did not have the MVP. So Shea had a brilliant year. Brilliant. He's a phenomenal basketball player. He's not more deserving than Nikola Jokic of the MVP. He's just not. But SGA is going to be awarded it tonight. And I have nothing against SGA. I really don't. But I just have a problem with the flimsy arguments that I hear from people who are voting for SGA over Nikola Jokic. That's what I have a problem with. Good for him that he's going to win the MVP, but it should have been Nikola Jokic. But what's going to be interesting, or what is interesting, it's currently interesting, is that we have this MVP announcement today juxtaposed with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander becoming perhaps the most hated player in the NBA. That happened last night. And I haven't seen the ratings, but I would imagine that game one might have been the highest rated playoff game that we've had. Certainly, I got to believe it's the highest rated, Thunder game. Maybe game 7 on Sunday was higher rated, and maybe some of this is a carryover from game 7. But I have rarely seen the most divided group of people, which is everybody on social media, unite in the way they did last night against some of the absolutely horrendous displays of foul baiting that we have seen this year in the NBA. And that's, people are losing the plot here. I know Doris Burke. I mean, it was so bad that even Doris Burke made mention of what people were saying on social media or have said on social media about Shai. That's how bad it got in that game. Early, too. The guy shot like 7 free throws immediately. And that's another aspect of this I want to get into. But it's so bad, and you juxtapose it with the fact that Oklahoma City can be incredibly physical with their opponents. And you saw this for 7 games in the Nuggets series. I actually don't have a problem with the way that the Nuggets were officiated for the most part. Yes, they missed some calls. Yes, Nikola Jokic probably deserved more calls than he got. At times, Oklahoma City, I thought, went above and beyond what was necessary in terms of contact. But for the most part, I'm okay with the idea that you're letting the players play. But when Shai stumbles over nothing other than himself, that's not a foul. When he initiates, and this was an issue in the Nuggets series, when he outstretches his arm to separate from a player, I don't have a problem with that. But that arm cannot be then used to earn a foul. If you are pushing off in the NBA, it was hysterical to me. The NBA tweeted out a slow motion video celebrating what Shai did in that game, and it's a video of him clearly putting his forearm into Julius Randle's chest and pushing off. But he's then allowed to use that arm is then in play to be fouled, and to me that can't be the case. But where people are losing the plot in all of this, we use the words free throw merchant. Okay? And then it leads people to dig up free throw numbers and go, see, Shai's not a free throw merchant. He hasn't attempted nearly the number of fouls or free throws that some of these other players have. It's the fouls. It's not the free throws. It's the fouls. Shai doesn't just do this when a team is over the limit or when he's shooting. He was 3rd in the NBA in fouls drawn. 3rd in the NBA in fouls drawn. Number 1 was Giannis, a player that will run right through everybody on the court. So, yeah, chances are he's going to be fouled. Shai was 3rd in fouls drawn. It's not about the free throws as much as it's about the number of fouls that he draws. And here's the impact of this. You don't think that Minnesota was a little bit gun shy in getting into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as that game wore on because of the early foul calls? You don't think that's part of the plan? Because I noticed something, a trend throughout the Nuggets series. You know that Shea shot fewer free throws routinely in the second half than he did the first half. The number of fouls that he drew went down in the second half as the first half. Could that possibly be because defenders are backing off a bit? Because early in the game, they're getting called for these. It's not even ticky-tack. It's less than that. It's either Shea initiating the contact with his arm, which should be an offensive foul, if anything, or it's him just falling down and somebody being called for a foul. Therein lies the brilliance of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He is foul hunting. He's being a foul merchant early in these games to get opposing defenses, especially Minnesota, because let's be honest here, they have a much more difficult time being defended by Minnesota than they will ever throughout 7 games against the Denver Nuggets. But it's all a part of his plan. He starts to, and last night's a great example of this, because in the second half, he wasn't really doing nearly as much of it. And he did turn it on, as the Thunder did, and ended up blowing out the Minnesota Timberwolves. But that's the way he plays. He gets those fouls calls early, makes you back off, makes you a little less aggressive, and then that allows him to really go to work later in the game with his tremendous skills, especially his step back mid-range game. It's all by design. He's not a foul baiter or a free throw merchant all game long, but he does it early, and it's incumbent on the referees to set a tone in game 2 and beyond to say no, because clearly there are calls that Shea doesn't get in the second half that he does the first half. That's also got to be a part of this. Be consistent throughout the game, and that's what the Nuggets were so bothered by. It wasn't only the amount of contact Oklahoma City got away with on the defensive end, as opposed to the lack thereof that the Nuggets got away with, but it's also the fact that some of these calls early in the game would not have been called later. And when the stakes are this high, when the teams are so evenly matched like this, the referees got to be consistent from the jump, and they're not, and Shea exploits it. There is a brilliance to what he does. But a couple of those calls, like one was his own cousin was called for a foul. And there was another one that was just egregious. And you wish that he didn't have to do that. And he probably, in some ways, doesn't have to, because he is so talented. He probably doesn't need to do that, but it's ingrained in his game. So he's going to do that. Eventually, in games like last night, he's going to start to go away from it, but it's very intentional to get opposing defenses off balance, to get them a bit timid, a bit hesitant, to really get in there on him defensively. But it's to see social media unite the way it did last night to paint SGA as maybe, at least of the day, the most unlikable player in the NBA. And he's going to be awarded the highest individual honor 24 hours later. He probably doesn't need to do this. The Thunder don't need to do this. They did the thing that they normally do, which is second half, they turn it on, they speed you up, and they just run up and down the floor. The Nuggets couldn't handle it. Minnesota had a huge problem with it. And it's why Oklahoma City's the best team in the NBA. But there's this other aspect to it that is just it's so unlikable. It's not aesthetically pleasing. But that's your MVP. It's not an argument against him. I've never once brought up the free throws as an argument against SGA. Because I think we probably people on social media take a clip or two and probably blow it a little bit out of proportion. But the guy was third in the NBA in fouls drawn. Not number one. You would think he was number one by a mile. He's still third. He still does it. And it's not just free throws, it's fouls. Fouls of all kinds. But if you did not happen to watch any of the previous series with OKC and Denver, and you just turned it on last night, welcome to what we've watched for 2 weeks. Thunder take game one in convincing fashion. I'll tell you one adjustment the Wolves need to make. Anthony Edwards cannot disappear. When Nikola Jokic struggled, the Nuggets really struggled. Wolves aren't winning this series if Anthony Edwards just disappears for like 3/4 of the game. No way they're winning this series if that happens. Game one goes to OKC. Game one of the Eastern Conference Finals is tonight between the Knicks and the Pacers. Thoughts on that coming up in a little bit. Coming up next, we go to the NFL because the greatest fight in the history of the NFL, good versus evil, occurred today. And good prevailed. Tell you about it next on Extra Sports 1300. You know, throughout history, there are heroes along the way that you don't remember. And it's not anybody's fault. You know, time. That's all it is. Over time, you forget about those who stood up at the most important times of our history and said no. But on the day, we can acknowledge them and salute them. And so today, I salute the Baltimore Ravens. I salute the New England Patriots. I salute the New York Jets, and I salute the Detroit Lions, because today they stood on the right side of history and they joined forces with the Philadelphia Eagles to put an end to the nonsense that was the Packers' push to eliminate the tush push. Those were the teams that joined with the Philadelphia Eagles to be more than 25% of the league's teams. You needed 75% of the vote to ban the tush push. And the Ravens, Patriots, Jets, and Lions stood up and said, we're not going to let this idiocy happen. So sorry, Packers, go find something else to whine about. The tush push remains. Now the Packers tried to be slick. They tried to go, oh no, it's everywhere on the field. Everywhere on the field. We don't want anybody pushing anybody. They tried to do that. It's like when a senator tries to slip a bill through Congress and they like throw in something that they think is going to have, like, we'll give some money to road improvement. They tried to put something in there to get more people on their side, but in the end, it wasn't enough. They should not ban the tush push. They just shouldn't. There is no evidence to say that it is a dangerous play. And if you have such a big problem with it, then just allow the defense to do the same thing. I don't understand why this is so freaking difficult. If you are going to allow the Philadelphia Eagles to push Jalen Hurts through the line of scrimmage, then the Commanders or any other team, by the way, 13 of the 14 teams that the Eagles play next year voted to ban the tush push, which tells you everything you need to know about the motivation of this idea. This is not about player safety. This is not about innate fairness across the NFL. This is NFL teams trying to get one over on a team that they have to go through to win a Super Bowl. That's what all of this has come from. So anybody that wants to complain about the tush push, I don't want to hear it, because you're just trying to eliminate this advantage that the Philadelphia Eagles have. That's all you're trying to do. You're not making an argument for the greater good. You're doing it for your own selfish reasons, and I'm not going to back you up on it. But I will say, if there is really a problem with how unfair this play is, just allow the defense to push people. Why did we get away from pushing people? I have no problem with this and on any part of the field. Push them. Push back. Like, it's such a... I hate it's not a football play. I hate that. Like, so what? So what? It happens a couple of times. It's not ruining the game. If you have a problem with it, then allow the defense to do the same thing. That will end it. That'll put an end to it. But what's so crazy about this whole thing is that how insignificant of a play this is. Like, can we really talk about how the debate over the tush push once again underscores just how much of a behemoth the NFL is and how obsessed we are over the NFL, that we're making this out to be the balance of our nation is at stake here on whether the Eagles get to push Jalen Hurts on fourth downs. Not all fourth downs, just fourth and shorts, fourth and ones, fourth and inches. It's such an insignificant part of the game in the grand scheme of things. There are so many rules on the books. There are so many things that happen every Sunday in the NFL and all of these games that far outnumber what happens with the tush push. And yet this is the thing that we got to obsess over. Let the Eagles have their stupid gadget, whatever you want to call it, play. Let them have their stupid rugby play. I watched every minute of that Super Bowl, and the tush push had nothing to do with the result. Nothing at all to do with it. This is such an insignificant thing. But I do understand why the Eagles, right? The Eagles feel like this is a affront to them, that they're being picked on. We're the only ones that do this. It would be like if I got deeply offended that people wanted the play out of the game where you can kind of like slow down as a quarterback on the sideline and then take off. Like that I could understand. Because that's what Patrick Mahomes does. And really, when you're saying that needs to be eliminated, you're really attacking my quarterback. And I will not let you do that. So I get why this is such a big deal for the Eagles, because they're feeling a little bit picked on right now. But for everybody else in the NFL to whine about this, if you just want to say, I don't really like the play because it doesn't look like football to me, it looks like rugby, and then you just move on with your life, then that's okay. But I have heard so many people like this is in their DNA. This is who they are. This is their personality, is being anti-tush push. Like, how about you get your Toyota-thon quarterback to play well throughout the season, Green Bay Packers? How about you put your energy towards that instead of trying to ban the tush push? Like, let the Eagles have this. What difference does it make? But people get so crazy about this stupid play. And I start by talking about the heroes. I really don't. If it got banned today, I would not lose any sleep. I'm being tongue-in-cheek. I'm being facetious, calling the Patriots and the Jets and the Ravens and the Lions heroes. But they're on the right side, because they shouldn't be banned just because you can't stop it. What you should be doing is pushing for a rule that allows your defense to try and counteract it. Going and telling the teacher that Tommy is being unfair to you and you should go yell at them and tell them to stop, that's weak. That's cowardly behavior. Don't go to the teacher. Don't go to mommy and tell them to make them stop. If I have to choose one side because I have to, it's what I get paid to do is to take a side. I'm on the Eagles side. But I'm also more on the side of this has been blown way out of proportion. There are so many other rules that could be changed. I mean, the Lions even had a better suggestion. I'm more interested in this seeding the playoffs strictly by record. And yet the Lions are like, yeah, we're not going to do that. They didn't even take it to a vote. Why? I'm much more interested in that. What happened to the illegal contact is not first down anymore. That's a far superior idea to banning the tush push. Whatever happened to that? For this to be the great football debate of our lives is so weird. But it remains. It endures. And Philadelphia is celebrating. Maybe they can put a statue of Jason Kelce and with Jalen Hurts behind him, and like Dallas Goedert with his hands on Jalen Hurts' backside. Maybe they can put that in bronze right next to the Philly statue that is outside the Eagles Stadium. Let them have their stupid little play. But it's done. It's over. The tush push stays. Ravens, Jets, Patriots, Lions, Eagles. Everybody else, shame on you. Yeah, shame on the Chiefs. Shame on the Chiefs. You know damn well you didn't lose that Super Bowl because of the tush push. And you're trying to ban it. Shame on you. 13 of the 14 teams on the schedule this year for the Philadelphia Eagles voted to ban it. Is this about player safety? Is this about the good of the NFL? No. So you don't deserve to have your way. Deal with it. Stop them on first, second, and third down without getting within a yard of a first down. You won't even have to bother with it. So there you go. 719-247-1313. Your thoughts on the tush push remaining, which actually the best part of this is not that the Eagles get to keep their stupid tush push play that only they can run and no one else can figure out how to do it. We just get at least another season of saying the word tush repeatedly, which is really the big win of the day. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, some betting odds are out on Michael Porter's next team. You want to see where the betting markets think maybe Michael Porter will be moving forward? Get to it next here on Extra Sports 1300. Bovada has done us the service of setting odds for Michael Porter Jr.'s next team, as I think if any changes need to be made with the Denver Nuggets, most people would say it starts with him. So Bovada put out these odds, and the favorite to land Michael Porter is Golden State, followed by the Chicago Bulls. So I took these odds and I started drafting up some potential trades to make this happen. And I will forward them along to, or I'll use it for my interview I have Friday for the Nuggets GM job. I'm going to bring them my ideas on what to ask for from the Golden State Warriors and the Chicago Bulls for Michael Porter Jr. The Bulls, to me, is a pretty cut and dry. If I'm looking at the Chicago Bulls, because I'm not looking to take advantage of another team. I just, some people will just throw out these ridiculous trade ideas. Why don't we just trade Michael Porter straight up for Giannis? Like, let's just do that. I like to look at what could be a mutually beneficial trade, a win-win. Again, because I need to demonstrate my worth to the Denver Nuggets when I meet with them on Friday for the general manager opening. So for the Bulls, understanding who Chicago would not be willing to part with, I said Kevin Huerter and Zach Collins. Two deals that would be expiring after a year. You get a little bit of depth this year, but ultimately those contracts and the contract of Michael Porter Jr. would be off the books after a year. Chicago doesn't have a lot of players that I go, ooh, I want him. But the idea of just being rid of the idea that there has to be a core four, I think it needs to be challenged a little bit in the era of the second luxury tax apron. Why do the Nuggets need to have 4 highly compensated players? Or let me put it a different way. Can they afford to have 4 highly paid players? So I think that there's some merit to the idea of moving Porter with the idea of essentially freeing up his contract and allowing you the flexibility to kind of remake this team. So I look at Chicago and I say maybe that's the route you could go. And that would probably be the best trade outcome you could have, is getting expiring contracts back that essentially allows you to open up this money and you do with it next Nuggets GM the way you choose. The Golden State one is far more interesting because Jonathan Kuminga is a restricted free agent. And he is somebody that Steve Kerr did not seem to be too eager to play. And when he did play, the Warriors did not have a lot of success. And now they're faced with potentially paying Jonathan Kuminga upwards of $30 million a year. So perhaps Jonathan Kuminga could be a change of scenery guy. And you get Jonathan Kuminga and then you add Buddy Hield. I would really like Moses Moody. Like Tom texted in yesterday about essentially the 3-and-D type players. Moses Moody is the guy on Golden State that fits that. I would really like Moses Moody included in the deal, but I'm being realistic in saying that I don't think that Golden State would like to part with him. But you get Jonathan Kuminga, who has some potential, hasn't realized it. He hasn't been as good as Michael Porter has been, but perhaps a change of scenery would do him some good. And you throw in a Buddy Hield, which will give the Nuggets what they need more than anything else, which is somebody who can sit in the corner wide open and knock down a shot. Buddy Hield can do that for you. Buddy Hield with Nikola Jokic, that would be dynamite. See, we'll give you, if we're the Nuggets, we give Golden State the more proven player. We take Kuminga. And then we also take Buddy Hield. That feels like a win-win. Golden State's getting the more proven player. Nuggets are taking some of the risk here. But one thing you can say about Jonathan Kuminga, that is, he's not as hurt as Michael Porter seems to be. So I could see that potentially being a win-win. Here's a more interesting one, because the player I used in Trade Machine, because we don't know Jonathan Kuminga's new contract. He's a restricted free agent. So I had to have a placeholder. And the placeholder that I had in that trade was Draymond Green. Draymond's making about $25 million. You throw in Buddy Hield, and that gets you about where you need to be to make the contracts work. So let's not use Draymond as a placeholder. Let's make him. You want to talk about change of scenery. What would you think about Draymond Green becoming a Denver Nugget? Now you're also getting Buddy Hield. You're also getting somebody that has the ability to knock down open threes. You're addressing a need on the roster. But you're bringing in one of the most volatile personalities, and you might have the other one back next year, Russell Westbrook. Is that a combination? It's really a litmus test to see how much you as a Nuggets fan want to be rid of Michael Porter. If I told you that Golden State was interested, but in order to make the money work, the Nuggets would have to take Draymond Green. And then Golden State could put Kuminga in Draymond Green's role and move forward. I could see why Golden State may be interested in it. I don't know how it would fly with Steph Curry. But we can't consider every variable at this point. Let's deal with the big one. Okay? Many Nuggets fans don't want Michael Porter on this roster anymore. It's not the easiest trade to move or easiest trade to make. Would you take Draymond Green to bring defense into the mix and bring in Buddy Hield? Now you'd need to include one more contract. So I wanted to ask it just right there to get you thinking. Now we'll throw in another contract. Christian Brown. So you get in Buddy Hield what you want Michael Porter to be, which is a dead-eye three-point shooter. and you get the defense of Draymond Green to make up for the defense you're losing in Christian Brown. That may be enough to make the Golden State Warriors really consider trading a core member of their team. Now, I can feel that not going over well. I can feel your energy. You may not like Draymond to begin with, but if I told you that you have to trade Christian Brown to get him, you probably like it even less. There's another longer-term aspect to why a trade like this makes sense or could make sense. And I'll talk about that next hour after we hit the three biggest stories of the day. Hello there. Drive Time Sports on a Wednesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Thanks for tuning in. Whether it's on air, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, or if you're watching at Extra Sports 1300 on your favorite social media platform. The Eastern Conference Finals in the NBA and the Western Conference Finals in the NHL begin tonight. I have more on that in a minute. Your thoughts, welcome, 719-247-1313. But our first order of business this hour is to give you the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, story number 1, a sudden change of heart, perhaps?
And then Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, he showed why he's the MVP. He took over in the second half.
That was former Nuggets coach Michael Malone last night on SportsCenter, ESPN, with the audio there, of course. Michael Malone said SGA is the MVP before he was announced the MVP, presenting it as his opinion, right? This is why he's the MVP, because of what he did in the second half last night to help the Thunder blow out the Wolves in game 1. But you have listened to Michael Malone as much as I have, and you will recall on numerous occasions Michael Malone discussing Nikola Jokic being the MVP. So what has changed? Well, I'll tell you what's changed. Michael Malone has crossed over to the other side. He is no longer a paid employee of the Denver Nuggets. And his job description is to give his opinion. Because he's an analyst. He's not like whatever Kendrick Perkins is, and which is, resident say really dumb things guy. I'm sure it's probably a shorter title than that because it needs to fit on a business card. But that's essentially the role that Kendrick Perkins has on ESPN. Michael Malone is being paid to give his objective opinion, or I guess all opinions are subjective, but he wants his honest opinion. That is his honest opinion. When you are a coach or a player that crosses over to the other side and you're in the media, is much like when you are a White House staffer or a congressperson. While you have this other job, it is in your job description to have blind allegiance to your party, to your colleagues who are on the same side of the aisle as you. But once you go into the media, and how often do we see this? Somebody from the Trump White House goes on Fox News or goes on CNN or MSNBC, and all of a sudden they're very critical of President Trump, when you could probably bring up videos of them being very complimentary and agreeing with everything he says. And this is not just one side of the aisle. I have to be fair here. It's both sides of the aisle. But when you're in politics, you need to toe the line. When you're in the media, you're paid to give your opinion. Same with Michael Malone. Is he taking a shot at Nikola Jokic? No. Is he taking a shot at the Denver Nuggets? I don't even think that's true. I don't think Michael Malone was sitting there getting ready to go on SportsCenter is like, I'm really going to stick it to Josh Kroenke by calling SGA the MVP. I actually don't think that was in Michael Malone's head. What was in his head is to give his opinion. And if he is being disingenuous, it's not last night, it's when he was the coach of the Nuggets. I have no other recourse other than to come to the conclusion that Michael Malone, the entire time this season, believed that SGA should have been the MVP. I think he was being honest. Because he didn't say this is why he's up for MVP or this is why people are going to vote him MVP. He said this is why he's the MVP. That's his real opinion. He was towing the company line in making the case for Nikola Jokic. And yes, it is a very bad look. It is incredibly awkward for him to, just a couple months after going to the map for Nikola Jokic being the MVP, to then say SGA is the MVP. But it's part and parcel with the move that he has made. And it happens in other forms of media as well. When you're on one side of that line, you are expected to do this, that, and the other. And then when you cross over, you are unfettered now. You are free to speak your mind, regardless of whether it's being perceived as unfair to the team that employed you. What I don't quite understand, and I guess money is the reason why Michael Malone would volunteer to be put in such a position. Because he knew that he was going to have to speak on this at some point. It would have been easier if the Nuggets would have won Game 7. But he still took the gig. You don't think the MVP would come up at some point? But I give credit to Michael Malone because he spoke his mind. We just now know. We now know. He believed it was SGA. And he was just doing what you do when you're the coach of a team. You stick up for your players. You go to bat for them. Just the nature of it. But we have seen Michael Malone's real feelings on the MVP award. And I guess credit to him, story number 2, he was right. Because SGA has been named NBA's MVP to the shock of no one, including Michael Malone, apparently. Shams Charania reporting earlier today he would be named. I have TNT up on my television set right now, and I am awaiting the interview that they will do. And I'm also waiting for the voting results because I am curious to see how close this race was. Oh, maybe they're revealing it now? Oh, they're opening an envelope. Just wait for it just in case. Waiting with bated breath. Yes, it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. As reported by Shams Charania hours ago. And to the surprise of no one. We've talked about the MVP quite a bit over the last few years, really, but the last couple of months when it comes to SGA versus Nikola Jokic. And because the winner of that Game 7 on Sunday did not automatically win MVP, that's not in the bylaws. I will still sit here and say that the voters, the majority of the voters, got it wrong. SGA had a spectacular season. He was the best player on by far the best team. But he does not have a statistical case to make over Nikola Jokic. He does not have a doing more with less argument over Nikola Jokic. And he doesn't pass the eye test. We just watched 7 games. Tell me who the more valuable player is, SGA or Jokic. It's Nikola Jokic. And we just have to face facts that we are in a time right now where Nikola Jokic is so good and the Denver Nuggets are so bad at surrounding him with talent that nobody has a better argument or case to be made for MVP than Nikola Jokic? Nikola Jokic deserved the MVP over SGA. SGA wasn't, and maybe it's semantics, he wasn't totally undeserving. He had a case to be made. Statistically, he was very good, just not better than Jokic. He is very valuable to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but he is not as valuable to Oklahoma City as Nikola Jokic is to the Denver Nuggets. And if you're not going to go off of numbers, which I'm okay with, then you bring in the V and MVP. Value. SGA is not more valuable than Nikola Jokic. So more than a few of the voters who swung this thing SGA's way were doing it because they were tired of voting for Jokic. And they wanted to see someone else win it. Maybe it's not even anti-Jokic. It's just pro, we'd love to see somebody else win it. Love to award somebody like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for a great season. We'd like to give him something for that season. Just know that you're not giving it to the right guy. And then, of course, you have last night, which is our third story, and that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doing what he does best, scoring a lot of points and getting the referees to make a lot of calls against guys defending him. As Oklahoma City Thunder won game one in convincing fashion over the Minnesota Timberwolves. What is a backdrop of this MVP announcement in this interview that I see right now on my television screen between Charles Barkley and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is that last night, the entire Twitter world united against him and painted him as the most unlikable, or maybe better word, unwatchable player in the National Basketball Association. It's remarkable when Twitter, the most divisive place, the most divided group of people, unite the way they did last night. And SGA last night was foul baiting at his peak level. There were a couple of foul calls that went against the Minnesota Timberwolves that the referees who made those calls should never be allowed to referee in a conference final again. But it's what SGA does. And people will say, well, he doesn't shoot the most free throws, but he's third in the league in most fouls drawn. It's not just the fouls that he ends up shooting free throws for. It's the other ones that make a defender back off a little bit. Ooh, I'm in early foul trouble. I got an early foul. I got 2 early fouls. Now I got to go to the bench. It's part of SGA's game. And then you see it perfectly on display last night. He baits for fouls. He gets the calls. And then in the second half, he doesn't do it as much anymore. And that was a theme throughout the Nuggets series. He didn't get as many fouls in the second half as the first half. Why? Because against a defender that is at least a little bit timid about getting into Shai defensively, that gives him all the space he needs to go to work and to eviscerate the other team. And that's what he did in the second half against Minnesota. It is all a part of his game. You would love to say, why does he have to do it? He shouldn't have to do it, but it is very calculated. Get the calls early. Get defenders off balance, a little timid, to back off just a bit. And then with the supreme skill that SGA does possess, he can go the mid-range game, get out in transition, and put up a monster performance like he did last night in helping OKC win. You wish it didn't have to be the case, but it is ingrained in his DNA. It's who he is as a player. Does it detract from who he is as a player? I think it does a little bit. But I'll tell you who it reflects worse on: the officials. We can't lose sight of that. Like SGA, you can call him out for the foul baiting that he does and being a free throw merchant. You can do that, and that's probably fair. But there is an authority figure who is there to adjudicate these things, and they routinely fall for it. NBA officials have to be better. They have to set a tone. Just like SGA is trying to set a tone, the referees need to set a tone that, no, we're not going to allow you to extend your arm and also draw a foul with that arm. We're not going to call a foul when you simply trip over the three-point line. We're not going to let you do it. And I'm giving credit to SGA in this regard. I think he finds a way around it. I think he still has the ability to take over basketball games, but the referees continuously allow him to get away with this stuff, and it's only going to embolden him to do it more and more. So I'm actually calling out the referees more than I'm calling out SGA. That's your job. You have one job. And that's to make calls. And if you are missing calls so badly because you're being duped by SGA, then you're not that good at your job. And you are ruining things for the viewing public, just so you know. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Michael Malone, sudden change of heart, SGA winning the MVP, and SGA doing SGA things to help the OKC Thunder win Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. Coming up next, we'll stick with basketball. I want to get back to the trade scenarios for Michael Porter I was getting into earlier. Bovada says the most likely landing spot for Michael Porter is Golden State. What would the Nuggets want in return? And maybe a bigger thing that they can accomplish with the trade of Michael Porter Jr. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. So let's get to a text message that is a good jumping off point for what I want to get into here. Tom says Nuggets screwed this up. They should have gotten Hield and Fox last year. So, well, Fox for Jamal Murray, I'm all ears on that one. I think that was possible. The Buddy Hield thing, just for the record, Buddy Hield would have made too much money for the Denver Nuggets to be able to afford. He doesn't, for instance, make the same amount as Dario Saric. But the De'Aaron Fox thing, I'm 100% with you on that. But we're talking Michael Porter Jr. because I think most people can at least say if changes need to be made, it feels like he would be the most likely bargaining chip to be able to do it. And Bovada put out odds for his next team, and the favorite to land him at plus 300 is Golden State. Now, I brought up a couple of scenarios. Okay, one is Jonathan Kuminga is a restricted free agent. You could have Kuminga sign his deal, package him with Buddy Hield for Michael Porter. And maybe you throw in a Peyton Watson or something like that. And you get a player with some upside, and Kuminga may need a change of scenery, but young. And then you get Buddy Hield, who I'm not saying he's the cure to all the Nuggets ailments when it comes to three-point shooting, but the number of looks he's going to get from Jokic, he's got to knock down more than he misses. And then there's a second one, which I kind of stumbled across because I couldn't project what Jonathan Kuminga would make and put it into the trade machine. I had to take somebody with a similar salary to what I think Kuminga is going to make and try to make the contracts work. And that person is Draymond Green. So would the Denver Nuggets be interested in Draymond Green, or would you, a Nuggets fan, be interested in Draymond Green if I told you that they could trade Porter for Draymond? Would you take it and get Buddy Hield? This would intrigue me. Not only because I am in the content business and the idea that it could be Draymond and Russell Westbrook on the same team is fascinating to me. But you would be getting the defense that you don't get with Porter with Draymond. For all of his faults, still elite defender. And then you get the three-point shooting that you thought Michael Porter would give you, but so often in the playoffs, he just doesn't. And I'm watching Draymond Green right now on TNT. Now, in order for the Golden State Warriors to give up a core member of their team, with all of Draymond's faults, he has been a vitally important player to their dynasty. And I got to imagine that more than Michael Porter would have to come back, because you would need to probably throw in another contract. Christian Brown would make the money work almost dollar for dollar. Porter and Brown for Draymond and Buddy Hield. There's a reason, it's an intentional reason why I would consider including Christian Brown. And we can make this a bigger conversation, because really what I want to get into is not necessarily would you take Draymond, but with the Jonathan Kuminga deal, you would be essentially bringing in a player that would take up Michael Porter's cap space for the next 5 years. But if you take a Draymond Green back or any player that is on the same timeline as Michael Porter, you would have in a couple of years an out. And the reason why Christian Brown would have to be included, because many people are saying, get rid of Porter's contract and give it to Christian Brown. And I don't agree with that, because you're finding yourself in the same spot with a player in Christian Brown who has improved a great deal. Absolutely. But trust me, Christian Brown will become Michael Porter in this regard. You love him now because he's cheap. When he makes as much money as Murray and Jokic and Gordon, you are going to ask way more from him, and he's not going to be able to deliver. And you are going to turn on Christian Brown the way people have turned on Michael Porter. It's going to happen. So the bigger picture I'm getting at here is that maybe the best way for the Nuggets to proceed into the future, probably not going to be able to accomplish that this year, but if you make a trade that doesn't extend your commitment to a player beyond the 2 years you will have committed to Michael Porter, all of a sudden now it opens up real flexibility. I don't think it would be wise to give up Porter's contract and just hand that money to Christian Brown. If I were the Nuggets, I would hang on to it. And maybe you find some short-term deals, a couple of guys improve the depth. Or I'll throw out one that it's pie in the sky, I'll admit. 2 years from now, Luka Doncic is a free agent. If you put yourself on a timeline, and you can even keep Michael Porter and follow this. But like I said, I think the Nuggets need to find a more reliable three-point shooter. And if they can get some defense in the mix as well, like the Warriors trade would help the Nuggets in the areas they need help in. But if people on ESPN are going to try and perpetuate the idea that Nikola Jokic is going to ask out of Denver to join Luka, we are too early in that process for me to not be able to sit here and say, what if Luka decides he wants to go to Denver? And I know Laker fans really can't hear it because the end of the world is at the California state line, and you can't imagine that anybody would want to be anywhere else than LA. But could Luka, let's say Rob Pelinka doesn't get handed any other stars, because when Rob Pelinka is not handed a star through efforts that aren't his own, we don't know if he's actually any good at being a general manager. So let's say nobody gifts the Lakers any players, and the Lakers continue to toil another year. And they toil another year, and LeBron retires. Could Luka look over at Denver and go, I can go play with my buddy, and we could go win a title? There are some reasons to open up essentially a third max slot. Now, the Nuggets would have to do some other financial because it would be a super max and all that kind of stuff. But the idea that you're not paying 4 players the maximum amount of money that you can pay him. I think what's one of the aspects to the debate of where the Denver Nuggets need to go, in getting back to Josh Kroenke's comments last year about how they were built under a different financial model. They were built under a different CBA. Is the idea past? Are we over with the idea of a core 4? So many people just want to offload Michael Porter and give that money to Christian Braun. And I don't think that's a good idea. I am not giving Christian Braun $30 million. So what other recourse do you have? Because I'm not saying he wouldn't fetch it on the open market. You have to trade him before you pay him. For once, the Denver Nuggets need to trade a guy before they have to pay him instead of trying to untangle the mess that they put themselves in, to Tom's point about paying all of these guys. Again, under hindsight being 2020, I get it. It was all well and good at the time. Now it's bad. But this financial model is here to stay. They're going to have their 7th different champion in 7 years. The super team era is dead. The NBA's not going back. The idea that the Nuggets need to have 4 players making over $30 million, unless one of them is Luka Doncic, I don't think that's a good idea. Now, they don't have to make a move with Christian Braun right now, and they got enough on their plate as it is, but I don't rule out the possibility of Christian Braun being a sweetener to allow the Nuggets to get what they need, and then also in the longer term, it opens up this spot on the roster, this cap space, where, I don't know, I mean, the Nuggets wouldn't be the first team to be opening up space intentionally, waiting for a player to hit free agency until Luka Doncic signs an extension with the Los Angeles Lakers. It is just as likely that he leaves via free agency as he stays with the Lakers. And I know Laker fans are being great to him and everything. And if I were a betting man, I'd say he probably stays, but he hasn't yet. All those teams that opened up cap space for LeBron all those years ago, yeah, turned out that some of those teams probably didn't really have a chance. But that's why Plan Bs exist. You open up that financial flexibility, but not just blindly handing Christian Braun the money that you are currently paying Michael Porter, and you have the ability for flexibility under a very restrictive financial model. And now, if you're willing to entertain the idea of trading Christian Braun for the right price, of course, I'm not giving away Christian Braun. But we have to face facts here. Michael Porter and Jamal Murray's trade value is as low as it has ever been. Is it 0? We'll find out. But it's lower than it ever has been. The idea that the Nuggets are going to take Michael Porter and transform him into Kevin Durant without giving Phoenix more than just Michael Porter, or getting out from under Jamal Murray's contract and a team just happily taking his contract for no reason, it's not feasible. And it's why I say that I think that we're set up for disappointment. I think the Nuggets are going to do very little to nothing this offseason. But if they're really willing to engage and really committed to changing this team, the makeup of this team, to give them a chance to get the best player in the world back to where he belongs, which is the NBA Finals, you're going to have to add. It's not going to be Murray and that's it. It's not going to be Porter and that's it, and expect to upgrade your roster. Even to get lesser players in that just have a different skill set. Other GMs aren't stupid. If the Denver Nuggets call them offering up Jamal Murray, a player that for many people seemed untouchable, right? He's a core member of this team. They're going to be like, they're a little desperate here. We'll take Jamal Murray, but we're going to need more. And there's a practical reason to not give Christian Braun the money that so many people think he's going to warrant when he hits the open market or when he's eligible to sign an extension. The Nuggets in this way are a bit of a guinea pig because they won their title right as this new CBA was coming into play. They're really at the forefront of this. How they handle this may be a blueprint for other teams. But I think, again, with the Golden State trade, you get defense. In Draymond Green, you get a volatile personality. Maybe David Adelman is in over his skis and you got to go out and you got to get somebody that can handle Draymond. Maybe that's the ripple effect here. But you get defense with Draymond. You get three-point shooting, which you desperately need with Buddy Hield. You don't overcommit. You don't extend your commitment. You unload Michael Porter's salary. No more worrying about if he's going to regress when the postseason rolls around. And you also move on from the player that would be next up to get paid. And the Denver Nuggets MO is as soon as this guy is ready to be paid and he's our guy. Like, that's the thing. Bruce Brown, not their guy. They brought him in from somewhere else. Christian Braun, they drafted him. They developed him. The loyalty that they'll feel, it may come back to bite them. Because Christian Braun's going to turn into the next Michael Porter. I promise you. Because part of the reason why, the main reason why Michael Porter is a problem for so many Nuggets fans is not because he's hurt. It's because of his salary. And once Christian Braun gets paid that money, you're going to look at him and say he is not worthy of that contract. And he's not giving the Nuggets enough. I think the idea of the Nuggets needing a core four, unless that fourth member is one of the 5 best players in the world, I think it puts them right back in the same position that they're in right now. Take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. Pacers, Knicks coming up. So are the Stars and Edmonton Oilers. And I think it's quite obvious what the difference could be in this Western Conference final in the NHL. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Some of the reporting coming out of the tush push debate is hysterical. Oh, all of this over the tush push. Seth Wickersham on ESPN.com wrote about some of the flaring tempers. I mean, just, you know this, like, we care so much about sports and there's so many more serious things going on, and we don't really talk about that because we like our world and we care very much about what happens in it. But the fact that these billionaires are arguing so much about the tush push with all that's going on in our world, it's hilarious. Apparently, Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, just went like scorched earth. Like, he said, whoever voted to ban the play would be taking liability for putting quarterbacks at risk. I don't quite follow that logic. But then he criticized Roger Goodell for advocating the ban. He also so this is going to be a little PG-13. I'm just letting you know. Here, I'll sneak it in at the end of the show. Jeffrey Lurie made an analogy during his nearly hour-long speech to defend the tush push. He told the room that regardless of whether the play was banned, it was a win-win for the Eagles because it was, quote, and this is a direct quote from the billionaire owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, in a professional setting, said it was, quote, like a wet dream for a teenage boy to create a play that was so successful that the only way for it to be stopped was for it to be banned. Classy analogy. As somebody who looks to incorporate analogies into his show every day, I never thought of that one. Never thought of comparing anything to that. Jeffrey Lurie, you're one of one, my man. As you might expect, that kind of image was not received very well from the NFL powers that be. So you can read the whole thing on ESPN.com over this tush push. It's so, like, just come on, people. The final vote tallies are in. Shea received 71 of the 100 votes. So that seems pretty decisive over Nikola Jokic. That doesn't mean that the majority of people were right, but it is the will of the people that SGA is the MVP, and the MVP garnered one of the lowest audiences for a game one of the Western Conference Finals in ever. That also coming out today, just in the last few minutes. Not as many people watched OKC and Minnesota as the NBA would have hoped. Maybe we'll get more into it tomorrow because I think this could be multi-layered, but it's hard not to look first at the newly minted MVP because they probably had a pretty big audience on Sunday, and they probably had a pretty big audience during the Nuggets Thunder series as a whole. don't know if the way SGA plays basketball is the way to get more eyeballs on your product. But there could be other things to it. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Appreciate your patronage. My thanks to Dan Oosterhouse and Tim Jefferson, newly minted members of the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame, for joining me. Enjoy your evening, whether you watch basketball or hockey. We will talk about probably both tomorrow, and also try and help the Nuggets figure their way out of this quagmire that they find themselves in. Enjoy your evening. We'll talk tomorrow.